Welcome to the afternoon session. My name is Hubert Mara from Halle University, and I have the honor to have 3 online presentations. The first one will be Mark from UCL about blockchain and cultural heritage objects. So I'm looking forward to the Bitcoin technology for archaeological objects, I guess. So you can fire up your presentation.
Right.
We see you have a nice place.
Yeah. Can you see everything?
Yeah. Yeah, it's slides are there. We see you very well.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me in. And sorry I cannot be at the presentation or at the conference today. We'll get to see something about the tool that we've been developing. And specifically, we've been working on this blockchain tool called AGUR. It's a kind of I would call it a kind of distributed database, effectively. But it's something that we developed initially for museum collections. So you'll hear these terms: collectors, experts, and the board. So I'll discuss those later on. But it's something that we just I would say we started about April last year. So we've created a first version of it. So you'll hear kind of where we are now, but of course also hear about where we're going to hopefully plan to go next. Just to give you a background, so decentralized databases can be key, in our opinion, for collaborative sciences. So when we're developing tools that are meant to be for collaboration among various scholars, it's often a benefit to have a kind of decentralized database approach. So that means basically people can be uploading information to your database without and have authority to do update to that database as they can. Blockchain offers one solution that is both secure and efficient. It uses cryptography. It's very fast, and everybody gets updated the blockchain without having to synchronize necessarily with the blockchain. They basically get automatically updated. Management and sharing of data are challenges not only for scholars but also for cultural heritage conservation and protection. So this is a way to sort of not only manage data that you have that you're dealing with, but it's also a way that we thought can be useful for updating things like not only about say like a research about, let's say, artifacts, but also you can use it to manage things like the status of given artifacts, conservation, and all those kinds of things. To date, there's been some activity in blockchain's use in heritage, but still relatively underdeveloped and really not clear on long-term potential. So a lot of what we're doing really is trying to understand the potential blockchain. I would say not only just creating a blockchain, but also developing and understanding its potential for research. So we developed the AGUR tool as a way to manage collections and potentially use it as a collaborative space for researchers. So we started in April 2022, and then we have one paper currently in review, and that's kind of where we are now. So what is blockchain, or why blockchain, I should say? It provides a way to enable community participation in heritage. That's the benefit that we see how it can be applied to at least the heritage space. You can think of it as a digital database or a kind of ledger, effectively, that's distributed among nodes or peer-to-peer networks. So it's not just one central database where controlling all the information, but many of your peers can share that knowledge and information and also update and manipulate or change that information in some way. Ultimately, it's a database at its core, but it's also a lot more than just that. So you may have heard of tools in blockchain such as Ethereum, Clado, Corda, and others. So this is kind of becoming increasingly common in many different fields, besides, of course, Bitcoin and those kinds of things. But it's also used for a lot of database management in general. Just an example, we're not the first to use it for heritage, but there's also, say, blockchain. The British Museum has recently been experimenting as well for their object collections. So what are the benefits? The benefits are it's decentralized, the use of cryptography, the immutable transactions, so you can keep a record of what has been transpired in a given transaction, so you can recreate a paper trail. It can be a kind of smart database, effectively, a way to sort of efficiently control information between participants and allow increased participation, I would say, among contributors. Also, you can do things like proof of ownership, perhaps provide information on all sorts of things, whether certain data are available or things like conservation, as well as information on research. So let's say your publication, that can be updated to the database, as well as the information about, say, specific objects or cultural heritage objects. So some current tools of blockchain exist in heritage, as well as others related kind of spaces. AGUR is the one we've created, which is decentralized. Some are more centralized, like Codex and Kapu. blockchain as well, but others are kind of other, not necessarily blockchain, but they use other kind of secure formats like Chin does, for instance. So these are kind of more or less examples of cryptography used in databases, and ours combines both cryptography as well as blockchain. So this is what the tool looks like. One of the developments, or we've changed the sort of landing page recently, but that's the web link. If you go to it there, you can see the blockchain tool. And we've changed it more to something like this. We're going to add something more snazzy in the near future, hopefully something with more cuneiform, certainly, on there. So that's something we're developing now. But that's sort of how the landing page looks like for now. So what are we doing? So our blockchain envisions that there are different kinds of users. So as I mentioned, we use this, or we developed this initially for museum collections, but we're now developing it also hopefully for other forms of collections for research. So the terminology we use is kind of still based on the museum kind of terminology. So you have a collector, let's say, so that would be sort of your museum manager, someone who's responsible for a given collection. You have experts, people who would use that knowledge or the data, say cuneiform tablets, let's say, people who understand these kind of information, but potentially can contribute information to that blockchain. So they would either do translations, they would put information or knowledge about that data somehow, and they can also verify that collection in some way. So that's another sort of benefit, is you have these experts who can contribute, to our active participants in that blockchain, as well as the collector who sort of is responsible for putting data about that the actual objects. And there's a board that oversees everything, so you have a kind of way to manage basically transactions going on in the blockchain, so you can kind of make sure everything is kind of done in a sort of legal or proper manner. So effectively a board that makes decisions about how that blockchain is to be executed, more or less, evaluates different sort of transactions that are occurring. So when you actually upload data, you basically upload it like this. You have a kind of a name of a collection, you have the basic description, you enter some details, enter provenance history. You'll see NFT prices. I'll talk about NFTs in a moment. So the blockchain allows users, or collection managers really, and verifiers to be the main users. So the verifiers are the experts, basically, and overall overseers. So these are the actual board members. So they help manage the blockchain, follow given rules. It's decentralized, but it maintains order, and rules allow it to create the given community. So you kind of have a kind of agreed upon rule system to follow. One of the things that we developed initially for was basically we wanted to verify that collections were legally obtained and also ethically obtained. So one of the functions that an expert would do is basically verify that those objects were obtained in a legal, ethical manner. So it's not basically stolen objects. So that's one of the things that we did for the experts. So it's people who can sort of help verify these objects potentially have been obtained legally. To give you an example, let's say you have these coins. Once data are loaded, they're available for verification experts. So you upload that information about a given object, you see a description, you can click and get more information about the objects. But the job of the verifier is basically check to see that these tools are legally obtained. And of course, they're an expert, so they can also provide new knowledge on these objects. They can perhaps send some more information, contribute, something like a translation or more knowledge about the object in some way. It could be a publication, it could be about reports, perhaps recent excavations, and so forth. So all that can be additionally added by the expert after the initial upload. And so what is critical to the process are experts who understand given objects. So these are the verifiers who send in information about the objects. So if the object is legitimate, for instance, we created a tier system initially. So this is to sort of validate how basically to check how valid given objects are. So for instance, if they've been legally obtained, they would get a tier 1 verification system. That is, it's a legally obtained collection. There would be a file that would be uploaded to that object, which would then connect the verification of those objects, effectively designating the sort of legal, ethical status of the object. So that's kind of the verification system. That's done to basically be active in the blockchain. You need to go through this verification process. So once you're verified, then those objects are effectively active or live. So once you pass that sort of verification process,
So collection data are viewed by these experts who then verify the collection is obtained in an ethical, legal manner. Then a rating system is assigned. So once you've gone through that, you have these objects now available to kind of commit new information to, add information to the database. You also get a reward. And this is where we sort of added a new sort of twist to this. We basically created NFTs, so non-fungible token. So NFTs are kind of digital objects you can effectively trade. We thought one of the challenges of museum collections or collections in general is, of course, is raising funds to maintain a kind of database or a collection, let's just say, for research. So let's say you're a museum and you want researchers to access your museum. Then, of course, you need funds to maintain that collection in any way, whether it's conservation or so forth. So you can create NFTs as a way to potentially raise funds for that collection. NFTs are these fungible tokens which can be traded between people, basically, and be sold as a kind of object. So NFTs of given digital objects. So let's say it's coins or whatever. So you're not selling the actual object, but it's actually the digital version. I will say this is a kind of experiment we're doing to see if this is a potential way of raising funds for collections. So we've been developing this and hopefully testing it soon with some of our experts. We're currently trying this tool in Cyprus and also going to expand it in the UAE. So I'm working with colleagues in Abu Dhabi University. So we're going to test it out there in terms of this concept of using NFTs as a way to raise funds. So hopefully we'll get more information about its effectiveness and as well in the near future. So you can, like I said, you get an object and you can create the NFT once you have that data uploaded. So it's a way to potentially help collections raise funds as a way to perhaps maintain those collections in some way, in some kind of manner. Yeah, so that's the thing we're going to be working on, is basically checking to see if there's a potential for using NFTs to help cultural heritage collections as a means to basically raise funds to support those collections. Like you can see that once you develop those objects, that, as I mentioned, the data is actually uploaded, so you have the information uploaded. One thing that we want to incorporate also, of course, is that I'll mention it later on, is to create collections where you can subdivide them. So that's something that we're still working on in terms of, let's say you have a collection of cuneiform tablets. You might want to organize those tablets in some way, perhaps letters of a certain king or something, and then or some other kind of designation. So that's something that we haven't developed quite yet. But currently, all the collections are treated as kind of one collection. So if you upload your data, for instance, you get 10 objects treated as one specific collection, or it could be one object as a collection. And then you upload the information about that collection, and that information is available. But you also at some point might want to subdivide, and that's something that we're going to work on next. So the benefits and challenges. So access, I would say, is a key benefit. Many museums and or repositories of information are relatively closed or not accessible. So many of us often find it challenging to use museum collections to do our research. So this creates, I think, inequality in who controls information and where development can likely happen. So only some of us can access data. Only some of us can access these sort of museum collections. And I think that prevents us from really making kind of a more open scientific approach to perhaps sharing and generating new knowledge. So I think blockchain could be a solution to at least part of this by creating a more open access approach, by enabling people joining the blockchain, sharing information from different sources and providing updates and information about given collections using a blockchain-like structure. We think of objects as static, but obviously they're not. So imagine any object like a tablet or coin. It's going to change throughout its history, whether it's its conservation status or information about that object, perhaps new research. So this gives it a way to make it more dynamic. They have long life histories that are constantly changing. So instead of depending on one person to update the database, basically, so that others can learn about it, this allows people to be active and participatory in that data knowledge transfer. So they can basically update information, upload information as it changes about given objects, and allows people to really participate in that sort of knowledge sharing. And it's a decentralized manner. I think that makes it really useful for collaborative efforts where collections have many users. So updates on collections and conservation might be very helpful for those who want to know more about current state of objects. So imagine if you're going to get on an airplane and you want to go do research on an object, you want to know what the current status of that object is. You want to know its conservation. You want to know what the latest publications on it. This provides a way to really update that information as much as possible by allowing people who access given objects to also update information about it, in my opinion. And of course, as I mentioned, the NFTs, not sure if this will be something that will work out in the long run, but it's something we're experimenting with to raise revenue. Because we know, of course, as heritage managers, one of our challenges is raising funds to maintain collections, especially museum collections or other kinds of collections where we have data. Maintaining those collections is difficult and certainly can be costly. So this could be perhaps a partial solution to some of this. So what are our next steps? We want to update that user interface. So basically change that landing page to make it kind of more aligned to what we want to do in terms of giving access to experts and collectors, as I mentioned before, those particular kinds of experts. Increase collectors' options for updating collection status. So that's what I mentioned, the differentiation of collections. So when you upload data about a collection, you can differentiate objects into specific categories. So you have sub-collections, basically, multiple objects and also singular objects into sub-collections. So that's something that's not currently available, but that's something we will hope to develop in the next phase of development, which I hope will start fairly soon. We're currently waiting for some funding to come through. So once that's come through, we'll hopefully begin some of that development soon. As I mentioned, we're going to trial the NFTs to see what the impact is, if it's a potential avenue of raising funds for collections, for museums particularly, which often struggle for funding. And we'll interface with research projects. So one thing I'd like to see is using this tool, not just for museum collections, but potentially for research projects. So it could be an option, for instance, to integrate AI tools, integrating different kinds of research tools, perhaps with blockchain. There's no reason why you can't update or change information in real time and have that information updated on the blockchain. And then that way you have a database that's basically actively integrated with your research effectively. And so as information comes in and there's changes coming in, then people in that blockchain understand the kinds of changes, even if it's coming from like a research project or a kind of tool being used on that collection. And of course, we want to find new ways for blockchains to help research. Like I said, it's in the beginning of this talk, blockchain is still pretty much an experiment, I think, for heritage. And it's not really clear what the benefits really are in the long run. We think there are some benefits, and I think there are potential other benefits that we don't really know about yet. So hopefully we'll conduct some more research to see where those benefits are in the near future. So that's it for me. That's where we are currently. It's still, like I said, we just started last April, so we're hoping to do more development this year, and hopefully by next year at this time we'll have a lot more of a mature tool in hand. So that's it. Thank you very much. Sorry.
The big applause you had. So it's.
I can hear you.
Do you hear me?
No, try it again.
So do you hear me now?
Do you hear me?
I hear
Yes,
you.
I hear you.
Okay, so.
Yes.
So I'm just kind of hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, you had a big applause. So this is probably you missed in the relatively cool room. So it's time for questions. Anyone? Yeah. So try to pass the mic on to you. And please state your name.
Yes. Hi, my name is Gustav. I'm with Ghent University. Thank you for your talk. I was wondering, how does a blockchain like yours interplay with existing repositories and other people's repositories in a way that's dynamic, so that we don't lose the fluidity of, well, ever-changing research?
That's a good question.
I mean, you're right. We haven't actually developed this to work with existing databases, but you can potentially, for instance, export those databases. If they're digital databases, it's going to be much easier. You could export given files. So the formats that need to be uploaded are fairly simple. You can basically upload text data or images or pictures fairly simply. So you can basically upload it as is without even much change. You can just, so if you have a CSV, let's say, something really simple like that, with divided information about a given database, you can upload that data and then assign it to given, say, images of given objects or whatever. So you can potentially work with existing databases so long as you can make a digital transfer. Obviously, it's more complicated if it's not so easy to transfer that information in some way. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we haven't really developed it specifically to work with existing databases because it doesn't, I mean, in all honesty, it doesn't quite mesh with it as easily.
Your face. Any further question? Well, maybe in the meanwhile I have one, because blockchain is also known for being computative intense and also eating a lot of energy. So what are your thoughts about this?
Well, certainly more and more people are using things like Google resources to sort of basically use it as a way for data centers to apply things like solar power for data centers, and no reason why we can't do that as well. I mean, I think that's something that we can certainly use, these kind of renewable sources. I think in the long run, it's not going to be a major issue. It's probably a current issue because of that transition's been slow, but I don't think it'll be a major issue in say next 5-10 years.
I have a question about the NFTs, and I know you mentioned you're still developing this idea, but I'm curious what you've learned so far about copyright restrictions, because typically when you make an object as an NFT, and that's purchased by someone, then they have the right to use that in publications, and you don't anymore. And the museum would potentially, that goes down this road, would be making objects for other people that they couldn't use themselves, perhaps. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I think the specific, it wouldn't be that, I mean, you can, for instance, have images that are not NFTs. So those can be used for publications. But I think the specific object that becomes NFT, you're right, becomes effectively copyrighted. So there'd be a version that is effectively protected. But it wouldn't be the version that you'd use for publications anyways, is the way I would see it.
By the way, this was Adam Anderson from UC Berkeley.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. You have another comment or question? Or?
No, it's interesting.
Sorry.
I like the narrative idea. These objects do change over time as well. It's something that's been previously, I think, unexplored about images, and I know that as we've collected images as scholars of tablets, for example, there's a lot of hemming and hawing about the copyrights of those images. We can't use the CDLI images for mass machine learning without permission from certain museums, for example. I mean, so this is intriguing on the one hand, but also maybe problematic on the other. So I'll be interested to hear the progress and thoughts as this develops, because I think you're navigating a new area of space for publication and copyright.
That's a good point. I mean, we haven't encountered that problem yet. I guess, part of the problem is because initially we were thinking just more from a museum collector standpoint, but you're right, as we transition this to more of a research tool, then you have this challenge of, well, what if people want to use these for publications, and you have issues of copyright and all that. So that's something that we haven't encountered yet, but it could be something we encounter. But I think that there's multiple versions of things that potentially you can at least sort of go around some of these issues, but it still could be a problem.
Hi again, Gustav again. So I have a question similarly. So you say that you would then, the experts would go through if they were legally obtained, but under which laws would they then counter as? Would you
So we had initially developed using the ICON standards, the museum standards, but this is more just to sort of verify. So have different tiers. So basically, like a tier 1 would be completely verified kind of collection. So it has some documentation. It's clearly known where it's been obtained. The objects. Tier 2 might be, say, a little less clear. So it's up to the blockchain, basically. And we created this tool not so much with a specific standards in mind, but rather standards that can be applied based on the blockchain itself. It's meant to be a kind of generic blockchain, effectively, that can be specific to the users, so you can apply your own set of rules.
You got a thank you from Gustav. Okay, further? Or otherwise, let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you. Sorry about the connection issue, but hopefully you heard it okay.
A lot. So.
Thank you all.
would be great to switch to the next speaker, which is Alessandra Gilbert.